Imagine sitting in a sleek lobby for 2 hours, watching everyone else get called in, except you. Then, in an instant, everything shifts. They realize who you are. If Danielle Milan had known how that morning would unfold, she would have worn more comfortable shoes. The sharp heels she chose were perfect for power meetings and quick exits, not long, silent waits. Yet there she stood beneath the soaring glass entrance of Westbridge Corporate Plaza in Scottsdale, Arizona. Her portfolio was tucked firmly under her arm, ready for what she believed could be the interview that changed her life. She had prepared meticulously. Mock interviews, in-depth research, pages of notes. Danielle had practiced every possible question Craig Ellison, the regional manager, might throw at her. Her nerves were humming, but her focus? Razor sharp. She arrived 15 minutes early, just as she was taught. Early is on time is late. The lobby smelled faintly of lemon polish and expensive cologne. A towering metal sculpture stood near the elevators, like a modern guardian of corporate ambition. Danielle walked confidently to the front desk, where a young receptionist, chewing gum with barely concealed boredom, glanced up. "Hi, I'm Danielle Milan. I have a 10 a.m. meeting with Craig Ellison." The receptionist tapped at her keyboard with a polished nail, then lifted the phone and whispered something into the receiver. A moment later, she nodded. "Mr. Ellison said he'll be right with you. Please have a seat." Danielle offered a polite smile and made her way to a seat near the tall windows. She crossed her legs, adjusted her skirt, and laid her portfolio neatly on her lap. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Then 15. At first, she didn't think much of it. Meetings run late. Executives have packed calendars. She opened her phone, reviewing her notes once more. Her stomach fluttered with a mix of anticipation and nerves, but she kept repeating to herself, "Stay calm. Stay professional. You've earned this." After 30 minutes, Danielle rose, smoothed the front of her blazer, and returned to the desk. "Excuse me," she said, with a practiced kindness, "just checking if Mr. Ellison is still available." The receptionist, still anchored behind the desk and barely having moved, gave her a tight-lipped smile, the kind that felt more like a dismissal than a reassurance. "He's finishing up a call. He said he'll be right with you." Danielle nodded, thanked her, and returned to her seat. The sun shifted slightly through the glass, catching the edge of her portfolio. She didn't check the time. She didn't need to. This time Danielle sat up straighter. The air felt heavier now, dense with the weight of uncertainty. Was she being impatient? Was this normal? She glanced up as 2 men in tailored suits strolled in, laughing about golf. The receptionist stood immediately, all smiles, offering coffee and guiding them past the desk without hesitation. Danielle blinked. Maybe they had appointments. Maybe not. She didn't want to assume the worst, but a quiet pressure began to rise in her chest. Not quite anger. Not yet. More like a stubborn tug that something was off. She forced herself to breathe. "Don't cause a scene. Don't be that woman." Her eyes flicked to her phone. 10:58 a.m. She'd been waiting nearly an hour. Danielle adjusted her blazer again, her fingers absent-mindedly tracing the seams. Her polished appearance, so carefully assembled that morning, was beginning to show the faintest signs of strain. What she didn't know was that this wasn't just a long morning. It was the beginning of something far more unexpected. By 11:15, her back ached from the stiff lobby chair. She shifted carefully, mindful not to show discomfort. Even tired, even sore, her posture stayed composed. Her face remained calm. Her shoulders stayed squared. Because Danielle Milan knew one thing for certain. She hadn't come this far to fall apart in a lobby. If anyone had been watching, and Danielle was beginning to believe no one was, they'd see a woman in complete control. Or at least, that's what she kept telling herself. From her seat, she had a clear view of the front desk. She watched as two more visitors arrived, both white men in crisp button-downs and khaki chinos. They were greeted with warm handshakes and casual conversation, offered drinks, and ushered inside with an ease that needed no justification. Danielle stared a second too long before forcing herself to look away. Maybe they're regulars. Maybe their meetings are more urgent. Still, the thought settled in her stomach like a stone. She adjusted her grip on the portfolio, her knuckles whitening slightly. Every minute now stretched unbearably thin. The receptionist never looked her way again. No one did. Danielle could have been a coat rack, a chair, a quiet fixture in the room. It wasn't just that she was being ignored. It was how she was being ignored. With that specific kind of indifference that suggests your presence is not just unnoticed, but unwelcome, as if waiting silently, patiently, was somehow too much to ask of them. Everyone simply looked past her. Across the lobby, a janitor appeared, pushing a cart loaded with cleaning supplies. He moved slowly, methodically, an older man with gray hair tucked beneath a worn baseball cap. Their eyes met briefly. His look wasn't rushed, indifferent, or apologetic. It was simply human. A quiet nod passed between them, an unspoken recognition shared by people long used to being overlooked. Danielle gave a small smile and lowered her gaze. She didn't want to appear idle, didn't want to give the impression she was loitering or being difficult. Even now, every movement was calculated, every breath measured, every glance rehearsed. Minutes later, the rhythm of the lobby shifted. A tall woman entered, cutting across the room in a sharp navy blue pantsuit. Danielle recognized her instantly. Avery Lindum, Vice President of Operations. She'd seen Avery speak on leadership panels, read her quotes in trade publications. The receptionist shot to her feet. "Good morning, Miss Lindstrom. Can I get you a coffee? Water?" Avery waved her off with polite efficiency, barely slowing as she strode toward the elevators. Danielle's throat tightened. She straightened once more, tugging at the hem of her blazer, sitting taller, trying to look busy, important, seen. At 11:30, she stood again and made her way, calm, careful, back to the front desk. "Hi," she said, voice calm but firm. "Just wondering if I should reschedule. It's been quite a while." The receptionist looked up, wide-eyed, as if she'd only just remembered Danielle was still there. "Oh, Mr. Ellison is just finishing up a call. He should be right with you." The same words, the same rehearsed smile, the same nothing. Danielle swallowed hard. A bitter taste curled in the back of her throat. Shame. But not hers. A shame she hadn't earned, didn't ask for, and shouldn't have to carry. She nodded, more to herself than the receptionist, and quietly returned to her seat. This time, when she crossed her legs, a slow heat began to rise behind her eyes. Not quite anger. Not yet. But a quiet burn smoldering just beneath her polished calm. She would not cry. She would not fidget. She would not give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her unravel. In the corner of the room, the clock ticked loud enough to notice. But it wasn't just time that was moving forward. Something inside Danielle was shifting, too. And it wasn't going back. 11:58 a.m. Danielle stared at her phone, silently willing the minutes to slow. 2 hours had passed. Not one real update. The lobby hummed around her with polite efficiency. Footsteps, hushed conversations, the low buzz of fluorescent lights. But to Danielle, everything had narrowed to stillness. Focus. a moment balancing on the edge of something bigger. Footsteps, printers, hushed conversations echoing through glass walls. Life moved on around her, swift, polished, efficient. Yet Danielle sat in the center of it all, invisible, like a shadow no one wanted to notice. She glanced around again. The receptionist was now laughing with a delivery guy dropping off lunch. Across the room, two men in crisp sports jackets clinked their coffee cups in a silent toast before disappearing into the elevators. Meanwhile, Danielle sat in silence. Her thoughts had grown louder, sharper. Would they have made a white man wait 2 hours? Would Craig have kept someone else, someone important, waiting without even a real excuse? Was she being too sensitive? Was she imagining things? Or was this exactly what it looked like? She shifted slightly, stretching one leg to ease the numbness creeping up her calf. Her heel made a soft squeak against the marble floor. Heads turned, quick glances. Fleeting, but sharp. Not curious, not kind, just irritated. As if her presence, her movement, her breath was somehow disrupting something more valuable. Danielle pressed her lips together, tight. Her breath caught in her throat, locked between composure and fury. She wasn't crying. She wasn't breaking. But something inside her was starting to speak louder than the silence around her. She uncrossed her legs and sat perfectly still. Her body was calm, but inside, something pressed harder against her chest. She thought of her mother, strong, steady, unbending, who used to tell her back in Little Rock, "You've got to be twice as good, baby girl, just to get half as far." Danielle used to roll her eyes at that. It had sounded like something people said out of habit. But here, in this tall, gleaming lobby of polished glass and expensive silence, her mother's words wrapped around her like a second skin. She opened her portfolio again, flipping to the same page she'd seen a dozen times. She wasn't reading. She was hiding. Hiding the heat of shame, the weariness in her bones, the quiet, growing fury she kept pressing down like a bruise she didn't dare touch. Then, movement. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw him, Craig Ellison. He stepped out from the glass doors behind the front desk, tall and thin, with a salt and pepper beard and a crisp white shirt. A clipboard tucked casually under one arm. He was laughing, mid-conversation with another manager, like it was just another Tuesday. Danielle straightened, her posture sharpened. This was it. She hoped, no, expected, he would finally see her. His eyes swept across the lobby, and then past her, like she was part of the decor, a chair, a coat rack, an afterthought. Danielle's hands tightened around the edges of her portfolio. She didn't move, didn't breathe, just held her place, the invisible woman in the middle of it all. Then Craig disappeared through another door, still laughing, still talking, never once acknowledging her. Danielle leaned back in her chair. A hollow weight settled in her chest. It wasn't anger anymore, not confusion. It was something deeper, a quiet kind of exhaustion, the kind that seeps into your bones and doesn't let go. She thought about standing up, walking out, holding on to the last pieces of her pride and leaving it all behind. But she didn't move, because leaving would feel too much like surrender. And Danielle M. Lan didn't surrender. Not when she had earned every inch of this moment. Not when she had climbed twice as far, worked twice as hard, spoken half as loud just to be seen. She stayed. The receptionist glanced up briefly. The look wasn't apologetic. It wasn't concerned. It was annoyed. Like Danielle's presence was a disruption, a smudge on the glass. Danielle clenched her hands in her lap. Her knuckles turned pale against the dark fabric of her skirt. Then, Just when she thought the day couldn't get any worse, the front doors opened, and something shifted. The sharp, deliberate sound of polished shoes clicking against the marble floor sliced through the hum of the lobby. Danielle looked up. Not just one pair, several. A small group of well-dressed professionals swept in, 5 in total, moving with that quiet, unshakable confidence that didn't require an introduction. The air changed instantly. The receptionist straightened in her seat, smoothing her blouse. Nearby conversations paused. Even the janitor froze mid-step. Danielle's heart skipped. She recognized 2 of them immediately. Martin Beasley, CEO of the entire company, and Sandra Whitlock, the senior finance director. These weren't just decision-makers. They shaped futures. Danielle hesitated. Should she stand? Was now the moment? But before she could move, Sandra caught sight of her. A genuine smile spread across Sandra's face. Warm, familiar. "Danielle Milan," she called out, her voice rising effortlessly above the quiet murmur of the lobby. "I didn't know you were coming in today." Her words echoed off the tall glass walls. Every head turned, including Craig Ellison's. For a breathless second, the entire room stilled, and in that stillness, something shifted. Danielle rose to her feet. She smoothed her skirt, calm and deliberate, and slid her portfolio under her arm like armor. She was no longer invisible. She never had been. They just hadn't been looking. Danielle walked forward with steady, assured steps, the sound of her heels clicking softly but undeniably on the marble floor. Martin Beasley was the first to approach, extending his hand. "It's good to see you again, Danielle," he said with a warm smile. "We were just talking about you last week. Your presentation at the Leadership Summit. Outstanding work." Danielle took his hand firmly, her smile calm and professional. "Thank you, Mr. Beasley. It's an honor to see you again." Behind them, Craig Ellison stood frozen. His mouth opened slightly, the awkwardness of the moment visibly sinking in before he quickly snapped it shut. He rushed over, his steps quick, and his face flushed a deeper shade of red with each passing second. "Melon," he said too loudly, the forced cheerfulness in his voice stark against the quiet tension. "I'm so sorry for the wait. We had a situation come up. No excuse. I apologize personally." Danielle turned to him, her expression a mask of polite surprise, though her voice remained even and controlled. 2 hours is a long time for a situation, Mr. Ellison," she said, loud enough for the entire group to hear. Craig's face twitched, the color draining slightly as his awkward smile faltered. Martin raised an eyebrow, his expression shifting slightly. Sandra crossed her arms, her gaze steady as she observed the exchange with quiet curiosity. Craig mumbled something about being busy, about phone calls and urgent matters, but no one paid attention to his words. All eyes were on Danielle now. She stood tall, calm, and collected, exuding the kind of quiet confidence that only comes from knowing exactly who you are and what you're capable of. Sandra lightly touched Danielle's elbow, her tone warm but professional. "If you have time, why don't you join us in the executive conference room? We'd love to hear your thoughts on a few upcoming projects." Danielle smiled politely, her voice steady. "I'd be happy to." Craig, still caught in his awkwardness, tried to jump in, offering to carry her things, asking if she wanted coffee, anything at all. But Danielle simply turned toward Sandra and Martin, leaving him standing there, fumbling with his words. As they made their way toward the elevators, Danielle didn't glance back. But she could feel the heat of Craig's embarrassment, lingering behind her. A quiet reminder of the moment he had underestimated her. For the first time that morning, She allowed herself a small, private smile. But Craig had no idea that the real consequences of this morning hadn't even begun. Inside the executive conference room, the atmosphere shifted entirely. It was lighter, more open, as if the tension that had weighed on her had finally begun to lift. The smiles were genuine. The conversation flowed effortlessly. Danielle was no longer a forgotten name on a waiting list. She was the center of attention, the focus of the room. Martin slid a folder across the polished table toward her. "We're actually in the early stages of a new leadership program," he said. "And after seeing your presentation at the summit, we'd love for you to be a part of it." Danielle opened the folder with care. Inside were project plans, timelines, and even early budget approvals. This wasn't just an invitation to a meeting. It was an offer for a seat at the table. Sandra leaned in slightly, her voice calm but resolute. "We need more people like you, Danielle. People who can identify problems before they arise. People who lead with integrity, without stepping on others to climb higher." Danielle nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of their words. She asked insightful questions, made thoughtful suggestions, and noticed how the others listened. Not out of politeness, but with genuine respect. Across the hall, visible through the glass wall, Craig Ellison stood, fidgeting awkwardly near his office. He glanced at the conference room several times, probably wondering how the woman he had dismissed, the one he left waiting, was now sitting with the most powerful people in the company. Danielle caught his gaze once. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She simply looked at him, calm, steady, and completely unbothered. Then, without a second thought, she returned her attention to the real conversation unfolding in front of her. About an hour later, Martin stood and extended his hand again. "Think it over," he said. "But personally, I'd love to see you take on this role." Danielle shook his hand confidently. "I appreciate the offer. I'll give it serious thought." As she gathered her things, Sandra walked with her to the door. "By the way," Sandra said casually, as if she were commenting on the weather, "if you ever have any issues with how you're treated here, come straight to me. No going through others." Danielle smiled genuinely, soft and understanding. "Thank you, Sandra. I'll remember that." The doors closed behind her, leaving Craig standing alone in the hallway, his gaze locked on papers he wasn't even reading. But Danielle didn't yet realize the full weight of the moment. It wasn't just going to change one meeting, it was going to change everything. The following week, Danielle received an official offer letter. The leadership program wasn't just a side project. It was a direct path to becoming a regional executive. Higher pay, real influence, the opportunity to build something lasting. She accepted, not for validation, not to prove anything, but because she had earned it. Every late night, every ignored email, every silent dismissal over the years had led to this. The same morning her promotion was announced, Craig Ellison was called into a private meeting. Word spread quickly. Quiet conversations in break rooms, meaningful glances in elevators. No one spoke it out loud, but everyone understood. His careless attitude had finally caught up with him. Too many complaints, too many missed meetings, too many women, especially women of color, left waiting as if they didn't matter. By Friday, Craig's nameplate was gone from his office door. Danielle didn't celebrate. She didn't gloat. She just kept moving forward, step by step, like she always had. The first big meeting she led was packed. Department heads, senior managers, and new hires. Danielle stood at the front of the long table in a crisp white blouse and a slate gray skirt. That was her armor. She clicked to the first slide of her presentation and began, Good ideas don't care where they come from, and neither should we. The room leaned in. They were listening. Because now, it wasn't just about that one morning. It was about changing the way things were done. Danielle's rise wasn't about ego or revenge. It was about the quiet promise she made to herself that day in the lobby, waiting for 2 hours, unnoticed. I won't let them decide my worth. I won't shrink myself to fit into rooms I was meant to lead. And for every young woman coming after her, especially those who looked like her, Danielle was making sure they wouldn't have to wait nearly as long to be seen. Sometimes people won't see your value until someone else points it out. But that doesn't mean it was never there. Stand firm. Stay ready. Your moment will come. And when it does, step into it with confidence, without a single apology. If this story resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Talk about it. Because sometimes sharing one story has the power to change more than just one life.